I felt like I had a direct path from high school to college. I didn't have options. You know, my mom went to college. She was a teacher. She had almost gotten her master's degree. She was like just wanted her thesis before she could get her master's degree. And my dad didn't go to college, but he was very adamant that I was going to. So I was like, great, I'm going to apply to a college that has a great theater program. I'm going to get my degree. Had zero idea whether or not I wanted a BFA, BA, or BS. I had no idea what that even meant. I was pretty naive. I was just laser focused on good theater school. My parents were a little hesitant to allow me to go to a school that had a theater program or to major in theater. So that was a conversation that we had on and off through my entire senior year. And I think the fact that I picked the school that I did allowed them to relax a little bit about that, because it was a conservatory level training program within a liberal arts school. Because at the time I had no idea what conservatory versus liberal arts meant. Just meant nothing to me. I was just like, I'm getting out of the house and studying theater, because my hometown still doesn't have a stoplight. It's that small. So any town was going to be bigger than where I was from. And I wound up going to the University of Evansville in Evansville, Indiana. I was in for a BFA. I went through the program. I graduated with my BFA and moved to Denver from there. I was looking for a big city that I could sort of start my career in. What I didn't realize is that not all major cities have major television or film or commercial, lives, worlds, industries. So Denver didn't have a lot. It's a little geographically distant from things. They just weren't producing a lot of media there. So the only thing I could do was theater. And the big equity theater in town, the theater that paid everybody, was strictly union, and they cast their people out of New York and LA, which was a thing. Not a lot of people do that anymore. It was a thing that a lot of regional theaters did. But I did some really great community theater with organizations that slipped me a couple $100 at the end of the show, And that was great. Later moved to Boston, and I was applying for grad schools because I was like, I don't know what to do if I don't go to grad school. So I applied to all these grad schools my senior year of college before I moved to Denver. Didn't get into any of them, so I had to move to Denver. Then I moved to New Hampshire and the Boston area and applied for more grad schools. Still didn't get in. And the day that I got my last rejection for those rounds of grad school, I was sitting at this terrible temp job eating a gas station tuna sandwich, because that's something you should do with your life. No, it's not. And I got an email from a friend of mine who was doing really well in Chicago. He had taken a bunch of improv classes and was working with Second City. And he said, you've got to try improv. So at that temp job, I opened up the phone book and I went to the theater section, and there was one improv theater listed. So I called them on my break and left a message saying, hey, if you're ever having auditions, I'd love to audition for you. I knew nothing of improv, knew nothing of what I was doing. I had no idea where this theater even was. And they called me back within 12 hours and offered me an audition, because they were having their first ever auditions for their first ever cast. And I got in and worked as a professional improviser. Usually you get paid in like beer and the satisfaction of a job well done. And I was making a paycheck doing this, like an actual paycheck. And for 4.5 years, that was my life. This tiny little theater in the basement of what was, at the time, a shuttered restaurant, the old European restaurant. Now it's the basement of a CVS. But this cute little theater, and we'd have, 150, 175 people there every night for a show. We were writing, we were improvising, we were just singing together, having the best time. And it was this core group of people that almost all of us stayed together for the whole 4.5 years that I was there. And it was fantastic. I started auditioning for commercials and I started booking commercials. I was doing voiceovers. Time in Boston, I wanted to go to New York because I felt like I had to. I felt like that's where you make it as an actor. And I went there and I worked doing more improv. I auditioned for no theater while I was there. You work so hard in New York to live in New York that you don't have a lot of time to do what you moved to New York for. It was hard. I did not care for it. I lasted 18 months and then moved to Chicago. And all of a sudden, I'm doing a lot of improv there and I'm auditioning for Second City. But again, I just wasn't getting a foothold there. I had an agent that was sending me out on stuff and I appreciated that. But I was just not getting any traction there. So coming home from an improv show, I think it was the first time I performed with, there's a musical improv group called Baby Wants Candy, and they're kind of famous in Chicago. I love them. So I had done a show with them. I was really excited, but I was coming home going, my day job sucks. I'm never going to get out of this rut. And I found an ad for a graduate program and they were having auditions. It was like email and you can get an audition. We still have some spots left. Full tuition waiver plus a stipend. It was like, you have an audition for grad schools in a hot minute, Amy. How about some more rejections? So just sent out the email, got the audition slot, took a lunch break and auditioned and got in. And at the time I was engaged again. And I was like, I probably should talk to my fiance about the fact that we might have to move to Georgia. And bless him, he said yes. He said, yes, we can get married and then, 4 months later move to Georgia. And I got in and I went with a lot of reservations because I was 33 years old and going to graduate school. And I thought, I'm too old. Because in my experience, everybody went to graduate school right out of undergrad. It was just what you did. And I hadn't, so I was worried. And then we had our first orientation meeting at UGA, and there's my cohort all around me. And I'm looking around, and we're at an Indian restaurant. Half the table are younger than me. Half the table are my age. And then there's one kid who was like 27. So he was right in between the groups. But it was this beautiful mix of younger folks who were right out of undergrad and older folks like me. I loved grad school unreservedly. Got to teach my very first semester and then realized just how much I loved teaching at a college level. But I had taught at the Improv Asylum. I had taught at festivals all over the country. I had taught improv a lot, and I had taught kids at a literacy program. And I thought, the only kind of teaching you do is the teaching I'd done or in an elementary school. But then I got these college kids in front of me and I was like, okay, so I don't have to break down all of what society has done to them like I did my adult classes. And I don't have to manage their energy like I did with my kids' classes. And they chose this class, so they want to be here. And everything just opened up for me. It was perfect. I loved it. I love my students. We used to have competitions amongst the graduate teaching assistants as to how many students we could turn to theater majors. I think it was number 2, but I was working really hard. While I was in my 3rd year, though, one of my favorite professors, right before I started my 3rd year, it was like the end of my 2nd year, when my favorite professor came to my office and slid a piece of paper across my desk. I was like, Second City is auditioning improvisers in the Atlanta area for their new review that's going to be at the regional Tony Award-winning Alliance Theater. And I looked at it and I looked at him and I was like, George, you know how many times I auditioned for Second City when I lived in Chicago, when they knew my name? And he's like, yeah, so this is different. I'm like, George, if I audition for this and I don't get it, it's like somebody's making the movie of my life and I didn't get cast in the lead. So I went expecting nothing and got a call back. Expected nothing after the call back. Was walking my dog on the most beautiful part of campus when my phone was ringing and I was bending down to pick up his poop. And it was the casting director from Second City saying, you got the job, as I have a handful of my dog's poop. And I'm like, no, nobody prepares you for this. This is when fate calls. It's when you're doing something disgusting. And so the first semester of my 3rd year of grad school, I wasn't there because I was doing a show at a Tony Award-winning theater and getting paid and singing in front of the mayor of Atlanta. And it was amazing. finished graduate school, stayed in Atlanta because my husband was going to get his MBA and he had another year left. I did another Second City review because it was so popular the first time. They brought it back and I asked if I could audition again. And they're like, oh, no, you don't have to audition. You're going to be in it. I was like, oh, yay. So we did the second one. It was even better and even bigger and it was amazing. I did a third review with Second City at the Alliance while I was living in Georgia, did another cruise ship, and then wound up getting sent on 2 more theatricals through Second City. That's what they called those particular shows when they'd sit down in the city for a while. Did another theatricals in Denver at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts, where I never was able to get an audition before. And did another theatricals at Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park. I wound up teaching for Second City, and then I had a great agent. I was going on many more commercial auditions, but just not booking. The last time I was in Chicago, I was in a weird age range. I wasn't quite old enough to be the mom, and I was definitely not young enough to be the young lead. I saw an ad for director of education at a regional theater in Maine. And I had been working in Maine every summer at Improv Acadia in Bar Harbor, loved it, had been trying to find work in Maine ever since then. And it happened to be at this theater where I knew the artistic director because a friend of mine from Atlanta said, hey, my friend's going to be the artistic director at this new theater. What can you tell her about Maine? The connections are so important. How every single person that you meet when you're doing this work is probably going to come back at some point in your life. So hold on to the ones that are awesome. That's the most important part. Moved out here to be the director of education, did that for 4 years while acting at that theater. Right about the time that I left that theater, I got an agent in Boston, and I've been going on TV and film auditions, which I'd never done before, and it's amazing, and he thinks I'm amazing, and the casting directors think I'm amazing, and I booked an independent film, and living in rural Maine. So I think that's one of the other big surprises is the fact that now, especially in our connected age, especially as we're exploring Zoom and all of our home recording situations, you don't have to be in New York or Chicago or LA to still have a viable film and TV career. Yeah, and so after leaving Penobscot Theater, I ran another theater that was primarily a concert venue, and that was fun because I got to meet old rock stars. But after the 2016 election, I decided I wanted to do something more than just angrily calling my representatives all the time. Because, you start to get to know their secretaries and they're like, oh, it's you again. Thanks. And a friend of mine, who's youngest mayor and first female mayor that Bangor ever had, told me about a training program that trained Democratic women to run for office. So I did it, and it was fun and it was great. And around the time that I left my last job, which was running the theater, I ran for city council. I lost city council. Something in me didn't care that I lost. We had a massive party with everybody that was running. And I was driving to the party and something in my head said, you didn't get it, Amy. You didn't win, but it's okay because you have other things to do. And the other thing to do was to run for state House of Representatives, which I did win. And I started my MBA about the time I started campaigning for that. So yeah, that brings us up to today where I'm waiting for my bills to come back from the Office of the Reviser. And I feel really guilty today because I had to pass on an audition that my agent sent me because we had homework issues with my kids last night. And yeah, it's pretty interesting.